Margot Wanberg, and this is where we harvest honey. A little bit about us before we jump into the introduction of beekeeping. We are three sister-in-laws who had kind of a wild experience with harvesting honey. It can be pretty taxing, and so we created our own honey harvesting right here in North Aurora, and this is our facility. But today, I will be teaching you guys a little bit about beekeeping. This is going to be like the dip your toes into the water sort of beekeeping course, where you guys will start to know some of the terminology. You'll start to understand what it's like to keep your own bees and how to keep bees happy and healthy. So we're going to jump right in. Today we're going to talk about know your why. Why do we even want to keep bees? Terms and tools, which you'll be surprised there are so many words that sound like beekeepers are speaking their own language. So we're going to jump into that a little bit, talking about installing or getting your bees, and we're also going to talk about happy and healthy bees. So we can jump on in, and the first one is know your why. But before we start, this is part of my why. When I was 16, I read this book by Richard Taylor, and he quotes, "We see only a part of the surface of things. The rest will be forever hidden from us, to be appreciated for its felt but unfathomed presence." This book kind of just talks about what it's like to keep bees, and I really recommend it for a beginning beekeeper. My why is the moment that you step outside and it's quiet. There's nobody else around. And I get to step outside and it's me and it's the humdrum of bees. So really, it's that moment where you're alone and you're starting to notice the details of nature, where you sit on your back patio with a cup of tea and you watch nature occurring, and you're not really a part of it, but you get to witness it, and you get to understand it a bit more. So my why is I wanted to become a beekeeper so I could know more about nature, so I could be more a part of nature and understand the details of the divine thing that called the honeybee. Now, it's really important to know your why. Why do you want to keep bees? If you grab a package of bees with 20,000 bees in it, and they're all singing, it's really hard to if you grab a package of bees, it's like 20,000 bees, and you bring them to your home, you really need to be certain about why you're keeping bees. What's the point of keeping bees? Are you doing it just for the honey? Because I assure you that's probably going to wear off. Are you doing it because you think it's interesting? That's a start. You really need to know your why, because this is something that's going to last for years. And it's also a little bit expensive to get started. So just like anything, just like starting a job or starting a new hobby, or really even getting a pet for your house, you really need to know why you want to keep bees. Something that we really love in our house, and why my husband and I both love to keep bees, is that it brings so much life into our yard. When you're in your backyard, people come over and they start to notice, and they start to come closer to the bee. So before you start, what you really need to know is you need to stop and you need to vision, why are you keeping bees? Is it right for your family? Is it good for your kids? Is it good for you? And if all of those answers align, then I recommend that you jump into bees, because it's pretty amazing and pretty fascinating. But the first step is definitely to know your why. And of course, the honey doesn't hurt. It's nice to have honey. But if your only reason for keeping bees is honey, I assure you it's going to wear off, because keeping bees takes a lot of work. Whereas going to the store and getting a nice jar of honey from a local beekeeper doesn't take that much work. So before you start, know your why and get your family involved. The next thing I want to talk about are terms and tools. Now, I'll tell you a quick little story. When I was just starting to keep bees, I was sitting at a beekeeping club, which I recommend, and I had my journal open, and people were talking in what it seemed like a different language. I couldn't understand what they were saying. I felt so defeated. And now I look back at my journal and I look at it and it says all of these words with question marks next to it, pages of just words with question marks next to it. So knowing your terms and your terminology before you start beekeeping will help you tremendously. So we're going to jump into that a little bit. I'm going to tell you some of these terms. So if you have a pen, if you have a paper, start to jot these down. You're not going to get them right away, but you will get them eventually. So we're going to dive into it. I'll show you some pictures. This is a smoker. This is what you're going to use when you go to your hive. This is Phil. this is filled with some shavings or old leaves or hay or anything like that, you are literally going to light this on fire in here. Close the lid and smoke is going to start to billow out. Now this has been used for centuries since beekeeping started. It really hasn't innovated much. What the smoker does is really interesting. It calms down your bees. So bees will release something called a pheromone. It's a smell in the hive that the bees will start to release when they think that danger is coming close. When you have your smoker and you smoke the bees all over, they're going to start to, they can't scent each other's pheromones anymore. So what's going to happen is that this smoke calms the bees down. Your bees, as soon as you open the hive, they're going to start to get agitated. When you have a smoker close to you, the bees are going to quickly calm down and they won't notice that you're there. So you can tend the hive without thousands of bees coming at you. So this is a key tool. Another tool is your bee brush. This is something that you just want to keep on hand. If you want to look at something on your frame, you're going to brush the bees off of it. If you need to move the bees any sort of way so that you don't harm them, you're going to brush the bees out of the way. So this is a tool that people will say, do you have your bee brush? Another tool is your hive tool. This is key. This is something that every beekeeper should have. You need this tool to separate the frames in your hive. So we've got our smoker, we have our bee brush, and our hive tool. Those are 3 important tools so far. Some other tools are going to be your bee gloves, protection. Your bee gloves, mine are coated in wax already, only a few years old. Some sort of veil. So mine has a sun hat with a veil sewed onto it, but any sort of veil will work. And your beekeeping suit. It's important to have these protective layers on top of you no matter what, because bees do sting. And the more they sting you, the more you'll get an allergic reaction. And let's face it, getting stung by a bee is not very much fun. So these are all very important things, as well as having your bee suit and your gloves and your veil. A good pair of wellies is really important, or rain boots, really important. Bees really love those ankles. Okay, so make sure that you're covering your ankles as well. So some important tools, we've got our protective layers. You've got your veil, you've got your bee brush, your suit, your gloves, and your shoes, which are all really important. Okay, the hive. So there's, you hear the bees getting loud. The hive is really important. This is called a Langstroth hive. Langstroth, in the 1800s, he created this hive based off of something called bee space. Now, you're guessing, what in the world is bee space? This girl is already talking about things I don't know. Well, I'll tell you, bee space is in between the frame. There is the same amount of space, okay, between every single frame. And the bees need that. Langstroth realized the bees need that in order to form a productive hive. That no matter where bees are, they're always going to create this bee space. So a Langstroth hive is already set up so that bees have the correct space in there that they need between their frames. Now let's go through the Langstroth hive, because this is the most common hive that you will see. Yes, there are other hives. You might hear the word top bar. That's a hive. You might hear you might see a few people having mason bee hives. That's not a honeybee hive, but they're little tubes, great for mason bees. The most common you're going to see is this Langstroth here. Now the parts I can show you are over here. This is what a frame looks like. So these are going to be inside your hive. You can already tell on this one that the bees built this out into some perfect hexagons. I wish you guys could smell it. If you're in person, I would pass this around, but you'll just have to imagine the smell of the wax. This is what's going to be on the very top of your hive. This is a top cover. Okay? So remember, this is your time to write things down. This is the terms and terminology, your top cover. Okay, so this is going to be the top of every beehive. Pretty simple. As soon as you take off your top cover, you're going to have something called the inner cover. Let me use my hive tool to pop this open. Inner cover is what protects the bees from the elements. So you put the inner cover on, and then you put your top cover on. This can get kind of confusing, so make sure you have an inner cover. Okay, now I'm going to break this down for you. So, this is called a super. When you see these smaller boxes right here, notice how this box is smaller than this box. Again, I'm going to say this word, it's called a super. So this is what honey is stored in. This is only on in the warmer months. In Colorado, we only put the supers on in May, June, July, and August. Okay? These are the only months that we acquire honey in Colorado. In other parts like California or Louisiana, you might see these supers on year-round. Right now, in Colorado, we only have one harvesting season. You're going to have smaller frames in here that will only be collecting honey. Then you're going to have a queen excluder. Okay. This queen excluder has these funny little bars on it, and it's the perfect shape to make sure that a queen does not get through. I'm going to repeat that. There are little squares or rectangles all over this queen excluder. And this makes sure that the queen bee cannot get through. The queen bee is unable to go from this box to the super. I'll explain why that is in a second, but right now, just know that this is called a queen excluder. And then you have your mediums or your deeps. So if you look up here, you can kind of tell there's two different sizes. This is called a deep. A medium would just be a box that's a little bit shorter. But either way, these are going to be where your bees dwell all year round. They're going to live in your deeps, and they're going to live in your mids. This is where the queen lays eggs. This is where they harvest honey. This is where they harvest propolis and pollen and all sorts of things. So in here you can tell I've got some frames. This is what it would feel like. It would be pretty heavy when you move it around. And then finally, the last part of your hive is going to be a bottom board. So if you get a hive, you're going to put your bottom board down on the ground. And make sure you have some sort of structure up here, like a elevated hive, an elevation of some sort. You can use cinder blocks. Some people get really fancy and they build their own structures. I have 10 hives and I use cinder blocks. I'll just grab some old bricks laying around our house or some old cinder blocks and build up a little structure, and that works just fine. So you're going to make sure to elevate it. I'll explain why in a second. You're going to make sure to elevate your hive. You're going to place your bottom board down. You're going to place your deep or your mids. And typically you're going to want 2 of these in Colorado to make sure that they have adequate food storage for the entire year. Then on top of your 2 mids or your 2 deep boxes, you're going to put your queen excluder. And when it's harvesting season, so May, June, July, August, you're going to place your super on. Then your inner cover. And lastly, your top cover. So this is going to be the entirety of a beehive. Okay? Now something else that's a part of the beehive, you're going to hear this word, it's called a reducer. Now this is used in certain times of the year so that wasps or mice or critters or something that we like to call robbing bees, I'll explain, don't come in. So you'll notice there's a little notch and you're going to set it right in front of your hive. I can't really stay right there for now, but typically you'll go right in front of your hive so that the bees, or so that those intruders don't get in and affect the bees. Now in the summer months, when it's really hot, you're not going to have that reducer on. You're going to have that reducer on in the spring season so that critters and rodents and wasps and other bees don't come into the hive. You're going to help protect the hive. And you're going to put it back on in the fall for the same reason. And all year round, you're going to have that reducer on to protect it from the winter elements. So that is what your hive is going to be. Okay, so now we're going to get into a little bit of terminology. So stay with me here. This is called comb. This is all called comb. So anything that's waxy and built out into hexagons is combs. Brood. That was a funny word. I had no idea what that was. But now, brood. Brood is what looks like a pie crust. Can you envision in your head what a pie crust looks like? It has the sheet over the pie so you can't see the berries, but you can't see the fruit inside. That's what brood looks like. It looks like pie crust over cone. And inside the pie crust, you're going to see some larvae. Larvae are little eggs. So brood protects larvae. Okay, it's not honey. All right, and then royal jelly. So inside queen cells, which we're going to talk about, or inside larva cells, you'll see something called royal jelly. It looks like this milky substance. It's typically found in a queen cell, so where there's an egg on here that looks like that is only meant for the queen, or forming a new queen. And the bees will feed this particular cell that's going to be a queen royal jelly, this milky substance. And that larva will feed on that royal jelly, and eventually that cell will become a queen cell and will become a queen later on. And we'll talk about queens and the bees. Pollen. I'm sure a lot of you guys know what pollen is in Colorado. Pollen in a beehive looks a bit different. It's the same thing. When you see the pine trees that get yellow, or you have allergies, it's the same stuff, but it's packed tightly into these little hexagon cells in the comb. Pollen is carried on the backs of the bees. You'll notice that if you ever watch a beehive, you'll notice that these bees come in with colorful pockets of pollen or pods of pollen attached to the back of their legs. And then they'll take that pollen and they'll store it into their hive for eating and for different purposes in the hive. Now, propolis. Propolis, this is a question I get often because sometimes people mix propolis into their honey. Propolis is this sticky substance. It's like gummy and gooey, especially when it's warm. It feels like glue. The bees, and it's exactly what it is. It's bee glue, and these bees they're making this glue so that they can stick together the cracks of their hive. Maybe they're closing up the entrances of their hive when it gets cold with this bee glue. But whenever there's a crevice or a crack in their hive, they're filling it with this bee glue. So when I go and I pop the top off of my hive, I'll usually notice propolis all along the edge here, just like this mark, because the bees have done that so that I can't open it very well. And burr comb. You will hear beekeepers say burr comb. Oh, I have lots of burr comb. Burr comb is the same as just saying comb out of place. Comb where you don't want it to be. Maybe compare it to a weed. Weeds are plants, but they become a weed when they're not where you want them to be. So burr comb is the same thing. Comb that grows in places where it shouldn't be. So that's where beekeepers will scrape up their hives and make it nice and clean, because really, you only want comb to be on your frame. So if you've got comb growing up here, or not growing, being formed up here, or comb being formed along the sides, you want to make sure to get rid of that so that your hive stays nice and accessible. The next one is bearding. It looks like a beard. It's called bearding. People will say, my hive is bearded. That tree is bearding. There's bees coming out of it and it's bearding. Bearding essentially means, it can mean two things. One, your hive is really hot, and this is a way for some of those older bees to get some ventilation. So they come out and they form what looks like a beard. The other thing it can mean is, it could mean that your hive is going to swarm, meaning they're getting ready to leave that hive, there's something going on, they don't want to be there anymore, they're going to leave. So they're bearding. It can mean one of two things. It doesn't always mean that they're going to swarm, but it's one of the signals of swarming. Bee bread. Again, this is like packed pollen inside the hive. Foundation. So this was a good question you had. Foundation is inside of this frame. There are little pieces of plastic. So let me show you. There are little pieces of plastic. You're going to get hot frames that look like this with wax or plastic foundation. The bees are going to form comb along the foundation. The foundation really gives them an outline to just get started. So if you don't have it, That's fine too. The bees will eventually make their own comb. It might not just look as clean and as uniform as if you were to have foundation. My personal preference, and something that we recommend at Three Sisters, is to get foundation. It helps with harvesting, and it'll help keep your frames nice and sturdy and last a long time. Okay, nectar versus honey. This is something that at Three Sisters we have to go through often with our clients. Honey is only 18% water. So honey is when the bees, they cap the nectar. You can kind of tell over on the corners over here that the shiny liquid is now being covered with this clear, almost translucent, milky film, or maybe opaque would be the right word, opaque film that covers the nectar, or covers the honey. So let's break it apart. Nectar is the shiny liquid that is inside of the comb, and it's about 60% water. So as the bees are regurgitating the nectar, when they'll start to take out the water in the nectar. And when the water content has gone down from 60 to 18%, the bees will cap that honey and they'll call it good to go. That is honey now. So nectar is when the bees first start putting in that great liquid that we love, and they'll start filling it in, but it's not quite converted to honey yet. It's only converted to honey when it becomes capped and it's 18% water. Now the reason that we don't want to harvest nectar, even though it tastes so good, it's still so sweet, is that it's more than half water. And water can ferment and grow bacteria, but when you have the water content at 18%, that honey is going to last a long, long time. It is not going to ferment. It's not going to grow bacteria. So it's really important that when people come to us and they're harvesting their honey here with Three Sisters, we make sure that most of their frames are covered with that opaque looking wax, so that we know that their honey is good to go and they can jar it and they can give it away to family and friends with it being safe. Okay. There are three main types of bees. The queen bee, which you probably know. The queen bee, yes, she rules the hive. Without the queen bee, there is no hive. The hive dissipates. You need, at every single one of these boxes, every single one of these hives, not boxes, I should say the entire hive, you're going to need a queen. Without a queen, the hive will slowly die. The queen bee, she is formed by using that royal jelly. So the bees have made her. She is formed in a different type of queen cell. She has a longer, drawn-out cell, and not that brood, that pie crust looking cell. She has a special cell. She was fed special things, and you know what? She's bigger than all the other bees. She's quite larger. As you can tell in that picture, all of the bees are circling her. Those are called her attendants, just like if you had a queen and some attendants. She is always getting fed and pampered, and she is the only bee that can lay eggs. She is the only bee in the entire hive that can lay eggs, and we hope with a healthy queen that she's laying about 2,000 a day. Drones. Drones are male bees. They don't have a stinger. They don't really collect honey or pollen. They're there solely to protect the hive. At the end of the harvesting season, so in our case in Colorado, around like August or September, the queen will kick all the male bees out, and unfortunately, they probably won't survive the winter, and it'll just be a hive full of female bees. The males are only there to mate with the queen, to go on a flight with the queen to help her get mated, and to protect the hive, and that's it. Now, the bees that you see here, all the bees that are the typical honeybee that you see flying around in your garden and maybe covering a lavender bush, or I guess in Aurora we get a lot of sage, covering some of that western sage. Forager bees are all female bees. Forager bees will go out, they're the bees that you see in your garden and in your bushes, They're the bees that go out and grab the pollen and grab the nectar and they bring it right back to the hive. They are also bees that tend to the queen. They are bees that tend to the larva in the hive. They're the bees that take care of the younger bees. So the forager bees and the nurse bees, they are all females. And they all are the bees that you are picturing in your mind, the ones that you see in your garden that are buzzing away. And this is what majority of the hive is made out of. Now most hives have about 20,000 to 60,000 bees in them. And they're mostly made up of forager bees and a few drone bees and one bee. This is a picture of one of my hives. So you can just see how many bees are on each frame. Bee installation. Okay, if you've gotten to this point, you're saying to yourself, I know my why. I know why I want to keep bees. I'm ready to do this. I think it's going to be a great addition to our family. I think I will love it, and I think I can do this for a long time, even if I get stung 1 or 2 times. At this point, you have written down a bunch of the terminology. You haven't gotten too overwhelmed, and you're ready to dive in. The bee installation is where you are going to grab bees and put them in your backyard, and I'll cover it with you on the base level. So the first step is you need to purchase a package of bees. You're going to hear the terms package or nukes. Either one you're going to want to purchase. Nukes come in frames. You'll get about 5 frames of bees. And packages come in this lovely box right here. After you purchase your bees, and you're going to want to do that in about January or February of the next calendar year. So right now, you can't just say, I want to get bees, because it's not the right season. The right season for you to purchase your bees, to go online and reserve a spot, because bees go really fast, is in January or February. You'll get your bees in about the end of April, early May. Okay, but you want to make sure that you're not waiting till April or May to reserve your spot for bees, because they go really fast and there's only limited amounts. So make sure you're thinking, yes, I want bees, go online, purchase your package of bees in about January or February, and you could probably start setting up your hive in around March. You want to make sure that your hive is set up before you bring your package of bees home. So make sure you have your things, make sure you have your inner cover, your outer cover, your queen excluder, your supers, your deeps, all the frames you'll need, your protective gear, your hive smoker, your hive tool. There's lots of things to get in place before you have your bees, so it's going to take some time. Make sure to give yourself that time. The next part is installing your bees. So it's April, the weather's warmed up, the frost has gone away. It's time for you to go to the store and pick up the package of bees that you reserved. You're going to go to the store and you're going to get this package of bees and you're going to think, do I still know my why? Or you're going to be someone that thinks, this is amazing and I have thousands of bees. Usually, it's the first option. What did I just do? You're not alone. We're all there. We've all been there. You're going to go to the store and you're going to pick up your 20,000 bees and you're going to stick them in your barn. So make sure at that point that you have your protective gear. When you go pick up your bees, you're going to want to make sure that you have your gloves or your suit with you. It's going to be, this is going to be a new experience for you. So you're going to grab your bees. They're going to come in that box. You're going to take off the can on that box. That can is full of sugar water that the bees are feeding. You're going to take off the can and you're literally just going to dump bees into a box. It's that simple. You take all of the bees out of there and you dump them into the box. And you're going to notice thousands of bees dropping. And you're going to think, is this really what I'm supposed to be doing? Yes. Just dump the bees into the box. Now, inside of this little box is going to be a little queen box. And it's going to be a little cage with one bee in it, and that's your queen bee. You're going to take that box, and you're going to put it between 2 frames. You're going to make sure to uncork it and stuff it maybe with either some sugar melt, like some sugar patty stuff, or even a marshmallow. I stuff mine with a marshmallow. And you're going to put it between 2 frames, and eventually, the bees are going to accept the queen. They're going to realize that they like this queen. They're going to start to feed the queen through the box. They're going to tend to her. And then they're going to start eating away at that marshmallow. And they are going to be the ones to release the queen into the hive. Now, say you just undo the queen and throw her in the hive. Those bees don't claim her as the queen yet. Those bees don't know her. And they probably are going to kill her. So it's really important that you let the bees be the ones to introduce her to the hive and not the other way around, because you don't want that happening to you. Once you've installed your package or you're new, you can always go online and you can look at videos of that. You're going to examine your hive. And this is something that you're going to do about once a week. You're going to make sure that you see the right things. Okay, now, this is some of the terminology that is going to get a little tricky. So follow with me, and if you get confused, go back to your notes and think, what do those words mean? When you go to examine your hive, when you're out in your backyard or you're out in your friend's backyard, wherever your hive may be, you're going to look for a few things. One, are bees still there? Because they're wild. Bees can leave. Great, bees are still there. Second, you're going to start looking, is there any honey? Are the bees bringing in any honey? Are they bringing in any pollen? The next thing you're going to look for are evidence of a queen. You're going to see, is there any evidence of a queen in your hive? And evidence of a queen is going to be a few things. It's going to be some larvae. Are you noticing any of the little teeny eggs? It's going to be some of that brood, the capped larva that we talked about that looks like pie crust that's ready to break out, some fresh bees that are ready to come. Or you might even see the queen herself. You might see that long queen with the attendants around her. That is what you're trying to look for every single time you go to your hive. Is there a queen in your hive? You're also going to start looking for things like queen cells. Now I can show you later, but queen cells are a long, drawn-out cell. I have one right here. They're a long, drawn-out cell. If you have a queen cell, and you already have a queen in your hive, those bees are thinking, that queen is no good, they're going to replace her. You see a queen cell? That could also be another sign that your bees are going to swarm and they're going to leave the hive. So you're looking for queen cells. Another thing you're going to look for is crowded conditions, which means is the hive just too crowded? Are there too many bees in one space? Do you need to add a box and give them some more room? Are there any mites or pests that have been in your hive? Mice are little creatures that can get on the backs of bees and kill them. So you want to see, are the number of bees in your hive reducing? If so, what's the issue? You're going to look for dead bees on the bottom board. Are there a lot of dead bees that are dropping to the floor of the bottom board? If so, is it due to mites, or is it due to pests, or is it due to overcrowding? What's going on? Also, we don't have to really deal with this one too much in Colorado, but wet conditions. My apiary is on a farm, and so they have sprinklers. Maybe you have sprinklers in your backyard. You want to take note of that. Are the conditions wet? Is your equipment wet? If so, you really need to monitor that, because you don't want any water inside of the hive. So here are some examples. This is a picture of a queen spotting. This is on a frame that I had. You want to lift up your frame. You want to see, look at all the bees around the queen. They all look very similar, and the queen has that really long abdomen right there. She's got that long abdomen, and they're all facing her. If I were to see this on my frame, I'd go, whoo, thank goodness the queen is alive. The next thing you want to make sure is that bee larva. Bee larva looks like two things. It can look like the brood that we talked about, or you might look really closely if your eyes are in great condition, and you might see something that looks like little rice in your hive. Little rice in the comb. And that means that the queen has just laid an egg. And eventually, in a few weeks, that will become brood and then a bee. So those are the things that are good. You want to see those things. Food for the bees. Is there honey on the corners of your frames? Is there pollen? If so, great. They're bringing in food. Bees need food to live. Queen cells. This is what a queen cell looks like. That long queen lives inside of those cells. And if you see these in a hive, you know that your hive is ready to swarm. They're ready to leave you. The queen is no good, and they're trying to replace her. Laying workers. If you can tell, it's kind of hard to tell maybe via video, but there's a bunch of rice in each cell. Not just one rice, or not just just one little rice egg, but a bunch of eggs that look like, or a bunch of eggs that look just like rice crowded in one cell. That means that you have workers that don't recognize your queen as having the abilities to lay eggs, and so they went out and got inseminated, and they're able now to lay eggs. Now, worker bees who happen to get inseminated and lay eggs are no good. They don't do their job, the hive will die. This is an issue. So if you see little larvae inside of your egg or inside of your hive like this that looks really messy, you want to make sure that you fix that and try and find that laying worker. Okay, happy and healthy bees. If you've ever read The Secret Life of Bees, it's one of my very favorite books. And a quote, and it says, actually, you can be bad at something. But if you love doing it, that will be enough. And that's kind of how beekeeping starts. You're probably going to be bad at it at first because it's new and you've never done it before and it's scary and there's all this unknown around beekeeping. You're going to be bad at it, but you just got to jump in it, and if you love doing it, you'll get good at it. All right, so happy bees. In Colorado, we have 4 seasons. So we have to beekeep alongside those 4 seasons. In the spring, this is the exciting time of year. Your bees are waking up. You might be installing your package if you're getting it for the first time. You might be bringing those bees home for the first time. In the spring, you're going to be treating for something called mites. Did anybody hear of that condition where everyone said the bees are disappearing? Well, the bees were disappearing. They were dying. Something called varroa mite, this little red mite. It looks like a red tick, and it gets on the back of bees, and it kills them. And so every year in Colorado, we have to treat our bees. So however you want to do that, whether you're an organic beekeeper or whether you want to use chemicals, it's important to treat your bees. And then in spring, you want to make sure that you're watching them regularly. This is the time of year that bees love to swarm. They love to leave the hive and go maybe on your neighbor's doorstep or your neighbor's tree. So make sure that you're watching for those signs and signals to see if they're ready to swarm. In summer, you just want to make sure that you're doing some regular checks. You want to make sure that you put your supers on, those small boxes, so that you can start collecting honey. So as soon as May hits, start collecting that honey, put those supers on, those small boxes, and then your bees will start collecting honey in those boxes. And again, you want to make sure that you're not seeing any mites or any of those things that we talked about where those bees are dying. And you're checking that regularly in the summer. In the fall, you want to start feeding your bees. Now this is something we haven't talked about yet because you might think, what do bees eat? Well, they eat sugar water, like a hummingbird might eat. So you're just going to make sure that you're feeding them sugar water regularly. A lot of people do this a lot of different ways. It can be as simple as putting a jar of sugar water in your hive. Again, you want to treat for mites, make sure that you're taking care of your mites. In fall, you want to be prepping for winter. So you want to make sure that you're not taking their honey anymore, that you're not opening them up a ton. Maybe you're wrapping them so that they don't get cold. And you want to make sure that they're good to go. They have what they need for the winter time. And you won't be touching them. And when winter hits, you want to make sure they have those necessary things: protection, mite treatments, food sources, and then you're not touching them. From about end of October, maybe November, until March, your bees are going to be living in their box without you assisting them. And then, the very last thing that we haven't talked about is extracting your honey. That's what we do at Three Sisters. This is our extractor. When your frames are capped and they're ready to go at the end of summer, and you want to get that liquid gold, you want that honey, you're going to go somewhere that has an extractor. Or maybe you might purchase your own extractor. And you are going to what they call spin your honey. You're going to stick your frames inside that machine, and it's going to spin really, really fast. And that honey is going to shoot out towards the edges and then fall down and gather in a bucket at the very bottom, where you're going to take that home and jar it. There's a few ways to uncap your honey. or to make sure that all those wax cappings that covered the honey come off. One of them is a heat knife, which we have the three sisters. You're going to take that heat knife and it gets really hot and you're going to cut off the wax cappings. Another is called a decapping fork, and you're going to scratch that frame and break open all of those cappings so that the honey can flow out. And then you're going to spin your honey. And that's kind of what it looks like all lined up in the extractor. And then it starts to pour out. And this is the part of jarring your honey. And it's going to start pouring out of the extractor and into a bucket. And you're going to take that bucket home and you're going to jar it and you're going to enjoy it, and it's going to be winter. And you're going to think all of that hard work was totally worth it. And that's the end. Thank you.